Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I am Salome Flores, and I will be moderating this session. I'm the coordinator of the Center of Excellence in Mexico, which is a joint project between UNODC and the National Statistical Office of Mexico, INEGI. Thank you for accepting joining us today to discuss about the implementation of the ICCS. It's going to be very interesting to exchange experiences about the implementation of this classification, that we know that it's quite challenging, but I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting exchange between all the countries that are participating. We have some countries from the Latin American region, and we have countries from other regions as well, observing and sharing their experiences. So without further ado, let me welcome our main speaker today, Mr. Enrico Bisogno, who is the Chief of the Data Development and Dissemination Unit in Vienna.
La unidad de...
To give some opening remarks. I will also welcome Oscar Jaimes. He's the General Director for Statistics on Government, Crime and Justice at INEGI in Mexico. Welcome, Oscar. And we also have Dr. Hyang-Woo Young, Director General for Coordination and Planning in KOSTAT, which is the National Statistical Office in South Korea. Welcome. So I'll give the floor to Enrico Bisogno. Enrico, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Salome. Good morning, everybody. I think it's still morning. Oh, yes, maybe somebody's still also evening if they are connected from other regions. So I'm very happy to join this meeting, even if only virtually. And just to say really a few words. First, that I'm very happy to see the friends from the two centers together in Mexico. So the two centers from Korea and Mexico, to see them around the same table in one room. It's this didn't happen it hasn't been possible for many months. So yeah, I'm very happy to see friends all around the table, and I'm also happy to welcome the others that are connected through still virtual connection. Just a few words really about the ICCS. You know, the ICCS is not something, even if it has this name, I mean, it's an international classification on crime for statistical purposes, is not only a statistical matter. You know, we couldn't, in many other policy areas, whether it's, GDP or labor or, employment or health, there couldn't be anything really done seriously, any, quantitative research, any policy analysis done without a basic, statistical framework behind. So it's the ICCS, which is a very young baby, if you compare with the other main, classifications, in the statistical classifications or statistical frameworks. Is still very young. It's only 7 years old. So it's still at this stage of early stage of development, if you want. But I think we have to give a burst to the implementation of the ICCS. We really need to have better information on crime, on criminal justice, so that we are in a better, in general terms, the policymakers, the public are in better situation to understand what's going on, to compare, to analyze, to monitor. And so it's not only a statistical thing. Of course, it's what we have. It's not a statistical matter. It's something much more than that. But we are aware, of course, to implement it, we need a lot of technical expertise. We need a lot of also technical tools, if you want, and we are working on this again together with the two centers to develop we can say a toolkit of methodological guidance tools. So, for example, the implementation manual, on which we are working also very hard, and we really want to finalize that by the end of this year. There is also, for example, an app that was developed by the center in Mexico, an ICCS app, which is already there, which of course, as all the apps can be further expanded, but it's okay. It's already an excellent starting point. We are also working on other, kind of methodological tools, guidance notes, and so on. One very important was also developed and finalized very recently, the one on femicide. I don't know if you are aware, if you have heard about this, but now we have a statistical framework for the first time for the measurement of gender-based killings of women and girls, also said the femicide or feminicide, which is a kind of, is again a byproduct of the ICCS. So it's starting from the ICCS. We have been able to develop, something specific for the measurement, a specific statistical framework for the measurement of gender-based killings. So just to say that again, we are working and much, I think, already has been done to develop these, technical tools, to facilitate the implementation. And again, much will come in the course of this year. But it's not only statistical, methodological tools that are needed. We also need a lot of collaboration. ICCS is not, cannot, as simple as that, cannot be developed and implemented at the national level by one institution only. You need many institutions. You need, the statistical office. You need the various ministries, interior, justice, entities, law enforcement agencies, prison administration. So even, public health. So you need a lot of institutions around the table. This cannot be done alone. Definitely, because the production of data, of course, to make it consistent, compliant with the ICCS, we need those institutions that are producing, that are producing and using those data. We have to let them really understand that this is key for them. It's not for us. It's not for statistical people. It's for them. So collaboration is key. And we have seen that when this ICCS has been implemented at country level, this has been possible only when there were different institutions working together, starting from the early stages of developing the so-called correspondence tables, from the legal, definitions to the statistical definitions and so on. So this is really, we need to have this capacity to bring around the table different stakeholders, but at the same time, we need a lot of leadership. I think it's, again, we need there must be somebody, there must be at least one institution who takes, which takes this matter very seriously, to see, so that there is a process that starts, a process that delivers, And I think, again, there can be different institutions depending on the national context that can take up this role. But this is really important that there is we have seen, again, the experience tells us that we need at least one institution that feels that this is really important to implement it, to make progress. So again, this is the role played by statistical offices, but which is, because for them, classification is usually, they are the repositories of statistical classification, but it can also be another institution. But the important thing is that, again, there is somebody taking the lead clearly to push this through because it's not an easy, let's be frank and clear, it's not just a walk, it's not an easy process. Things have to be changed. Things, the way crimes are recorded, the way data are processed, and so on, have to be changed. So, and of course, nothing. It takes some time for people to understand the value, and then for processes, procedures, softwares, or other to be adapted. So, of course, there is we need always to push for to have in mind the final goal. So for the various institutions that need to produce, and then again, publish this data. We have seen a lot of nice experiences, very promising and good, excellent experiences in many countries, especially in Latin America and Europe. But again, there are different. Also in Asia, we have seen a few important countries, including Korea, that have been making important progress in this. But again, yeah, we think that we are still at the start of this. If you look at the global scale, there is still some work. But this is why we are here. So with this, I conclude, and I really happy again to say again that I'm very happy to see this kind of meetings taking place. And from UNODC, in Vienna, the ones that are responsible for pushing this statistical this statistical tool at the global scale. We are totally very happy to see these processes taking place at regional, or is in this case interregional level. Thank you so much, Salome. The floor is yours again. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Enrico, for those inspiring words. And now I'll give the floor to Oscar Jaime, who's going to deliver some opening remarks in Spanish. And then we will have the interpretation later on. Please, Oscar, you have the floor.
Gracias, Salome.
Thank you, Salome. Hello, Enrico. Nice to see you. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am also very happy. I'm very happy to be with you in this meeting in the Excellence Center in Mexico City with our visiting colleagues from the Korean office. From the Center of Excellence. This strategic partnership was carried out 10 years ago at INEGI with UNODC, which allowed us to set a pathway for the improvement of crime statistics, both domestic and international. Since 10 years ago, this allowed us to set the way, to pave the way for what we're doing right now. The classification of crime for statistical purposes, that is a byproduct of this collaboration that we have with the Office Against Drugs and Crime of the United Nations, and that's why we have this excellence center that is serving Mexico and the region. This is a very relevant element that has allowed us to establish what Enrico mentioned, comparability at the international level. Here in Mexico, we started this through a technical standard, which is the denomination and the framework that we have to do this. Our country is a federation. Mexico has 32 states, which implies that for each one of those states, we have independent authorities, and the federation nationwide has its own. So that's why we have 33 police departments, both the state departments and the national department. We have prosecutors' offices that make it complex to have official statistics that could be comparable at the national level. That is why the work for INEGI was to establish this standard. The ICCS was a practice that was left pending for decades, but because of this roadmap and this joint effort with many countries and many testing pilots that we carried out, we were able to establish a proposal that was taken to the statistical community and the criminal departments, and that is why with these efforts today, we have the joy of having this meeting, which will bring us closer to these efforts. At INEGI, we acknowledge that the implementation of these sort of classifications is complex and large in scope. Guillermo Castillo, who will be attending this meeting, will be talking about the Mexican case and will explain how we have moved forward with the implementation of these technical norm and standard and a manual that allows us to establish these parameters and criteria for the registration and statistical report that we do through the CTS, this yearly questionnaire that was recently done for this year, actually, which allows us to deliver this information. This wasn't possible a few years ago. In Mexico, we didn't have any comparable statistics, but we now are very satisfied to know that we are delivering information that can be compared internationally. This work is the answer of the country's configuration. And in the face of this complexity, Guillermo will explain how we made it all operational. I am very glad to share our story with this select group of countries, and we will also know the methodologies that have been used in the implementation of the ICCS to understand our similarities and our roadmap for the future. Thank you very much for your time to share your challenges, your lessons learned, and your success cases. We believe that this will be beneficial for all the parties in this meeting. Thank you very much. And I apologize also because I will have to step out to another meeting in a few moments. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, good night. Lots of success.
We have the recording, so we will have the English version for you to hear later on, and we will also share the introductory remarks by Oscar. But thanks for taking the time of your busy agenda to join us this morning. And I'll also give the floor now to Dr. Hugh. Welcome.
Thank you, Salome. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Me llamo Jung-Hyang, Director General for Planning and Coordination at Statistics Korea. I'd like to begin my remarks by thanking the leadership of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography of Mexico, Director General Oscar Jaimes, and Chief Enrico Visiono. I highly appreciate this opportunity for our two institutions to collaborate, and I thank all of those responsible for organizing today's meeting. I also extend my sincere appreciation to all of our speakers from around the world for contributing to today's engagement meeting on the ICCS. Last but not least, let me extend my sincere welcome to everyone participating today online. Today's ICCS workshop aims to review the present state of the ICCS implementation among the international communities and to support its further applications. To this end, the UNODC has consulted with Statistics Korea and the INEGI, the two institutions have been established and which are currently operating a regional center of excellence on crime statistics in their respective regions. As the national agencies responsible for their statistical classification, KOSTAT and the DNEC have demonstrated a range of efforts in implementing and advocating for the ICCS. After the ICCS was adopted in 2015 as an international standard, I hope this meeting will result in practical solutions to address the challenges and concerns that many of us currently face by bringing together crime statistics experts from different parts of the world to exchange their views and experiences in implementing the ICCS in their respective countries. Furthermore, I expect that this meeting will highlight the need for standardized classifications on crime in the global communities, and that it will galvanize our efforts in promoting the implementation of the ICCS. The ICCS provides a set of standards that enables the credible and internationally comparable measurement of crime statistics, allowing for the national safety indices to be presented in a more objective manner. In Korea, the ICCS implementation initiative is led by KOSTAT, which is mandated by the Statistics Act to take responsibility of statistical classifications related matters. Under this mandate, Statistics Korea has developed the three-stage development plans for the Korean classifications on crime and has consulted with experts and conferred with the relevant departments and institutions to operationalize the ICCS in Korea. However, despite our best efforts, many tasks for the domestic implementation of the ICCS still lie ahead of us due to the discrepancy between the international classification and the domestic criminal justice system. In this meeting, Korea as well as Mexico and many other countries will be sharing their national and institutional experience and lessons learned during the course of their domestic implementation of the ICCS. Based on these national cases, I expect that this meeting will identify clues to resolve the most imminent issues in the national implementation of the ICCS, and that it will suggest some concrete guidance to address these issues. Once again, I extend my sincere thanks to everyone who had engaged in the organization of this meeting, and to those who are taking part in delivering presentations and discussions today. Also, let me take this opportunity to reiterate the importance of the continued provision for meetings like this. I look forward to continuing our dialogues on the ICCS in our coming workshop, hopefully in an in-person format after the COVID-19 pandemic finally ends. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you very much. And I think, yeah, you have to leave, but thank you, Oscar, for joining us. Thank you. And I think you'll meet later at some point. Oscar, si quieres despedirte, porque creo que va a despedir de ti. Thank you. Okay, so we'll see you later. And maybe I'll move here. And so again, thanks for joining us. I think as Enrico and Oscar and Dr. Wu already explained, for both Center of Excellences, this is a very interesting meeting because we are going beyond regions. I mean, we have several countries, or a number of countries, 7 countries sharing their experiences, and it's going to be a very exciting exchange of knowledge that we haven't done for quite some time, and we're very happy for this. So after the opening remarks, we're going to move on to the presentations delivered by countries, and we will start with Argentina. We have Guido Martino. He's the Director of Information Systems at the General Directorate for Crime Statistics. This is at the Ministry of Public Security. So Argentina has been working on the ICCS for quite some time, and it's going to be very interesting for us to learn what progress they have made since we work for a while with them to review some homicide data. I know that they have been incredibly successful in adapting the ICCS at some level, and actually I think they have gone beyond the actual definitions, and they have worked very extensively on this, the disaggregating variables. So it's going to be very interesting to learn the progress that Argentina has made. So Guido, I don't know if you're ready. I think I see you there. And just remember that we do have interpretation available. So if we change the language, you are free to choose the language of your preference. So Guido, I'll give you over to you.
¿Qué tal? Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, según corresponda. ¿Cómo están?
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. If it's possible, I would like to share my screen so I can show you the work that we have been doing.
José, no sé si querés decir unas palabras antes.
Sí,
Guillermo,
¿qué
would you
tal?
like to share something before? Yes.
No sé si se escucha.
Can you hear me?
¿Se escucha?
Yes.
Bueno, buenos días.
Good
Sí,
morning.
yo quería hacer una breve
Yes, I
introducción. Bueno, yo soy
wanted
José Rearte,
to
director
give a
nacional
brief
de Estadística
introduction.
Criminal del Ministerio de
I
Seguridad.
am Guillermo Rearte,
Básicamente, bueno, lo que quería
and
decir, este es un proceso que
this
estamos
is a
trabajando, que se
process
viene
that
trabajando
we
hace
have
algunos
been
años.
working on for a few
Y es
years
importante que es un
now,
proceso que
and
pasó
it's
por
important
varias
that
administraciones, varias gestiones. Es
this
decir, que nosotros tomamos un proceso que ya
went
estaba
through
iniciado,
different
la
administrations.
continuidad.
We took
Así que lo
this
que Guido
project
va a
that
contar
had
este
already
proceso, un proceso
been
que se inició hace algunos años,
started.
y
It was
nosotros
started a
estamos
few
haciendo una
years
continuación.
ago, and we're doing this
Y otro tema que
continuation.
quería resaltar
And
también es que, tal
another thing that I
como
wanted to
contaba el
stress is
colega de
that,
México,
as our
el
colleague from
sistema
Mexico
de seguridad de
mentioned,
Argentina es un sistema
Argentina's
que en la
security system is a
competencia
system
de la
that
seguridad, si bien es una competencia compartida entre nación y las provincias tienen la mayor
is
competencia,
also
digamos, en la
divided into
seguridad, y también
provinces
tienen
and the
las estadísticas
nation.
criminales,
And
lo
so it's a
que
shared task
dificulta
to keep
la
statistics,
recolección de las
which
estadísticas
makes
criminales a
it
nivel nacional.
difficult to
No
gather
obstante, hay una
national
regulación
statistics.
de hace
However,
20
there
años,
is a regulation since 20
que,
years
bueno, una
ago,
ley en
a
la
law
cual las provincias tienen que
that
reportar
says
a
that
nación
provinces have to
ciertos delitos.
report to the country
Y si
certain
bien esa ley,
crimes. And while that
digamos, no es
law
específica en los delitos que se tienen que
is not
reportar,
specific about the crimes that
se
must be
trabaja
reported,
en consenso con las
we
provincias
are
para
working
ese
together
reporte,
with
para ese reporte.
provinces to clarify this.
No sé si Guido querés ahí.
Dale, perfecto. Empezamos entonces.
Great, so we can start.
Presentación les vamos a compartir.
In this presentation, we will share how we are doing this, because this is a process that is ongoing. The adoption of ICCS in Argentina. The presentation is divided in 4 sections. We will tell you, first of all, how we developed this process briefly. We will tell you how all this work that we did, the obstacles that we faced throughout this, and the solutions that we found to try to resolve these challenges. We will also tell you an advantage that we believe is important in this process, which is the link that took place regionally in Mercosur, our regional bloc, where we have 5 other countries. And lastly, the progresses that we have seen in the standardization of classification sub-levels in a more disaggregated level. That is, first, let me tell you what the basis is of crime statistics in Argentina, which is focused on SNCC, which is the Criminal Information National System. In this system, we record all crimes and suspected crimes in the country. The source of this data are the complaints and reports that classify everything into 3 categories: provincial law enforcement departments, which is 23 provinces, and Buenos Aires province, which is an autonomous province, of an autonomous district, 24 in total. And we also have judicial sources, for example, prosecutors' offices. They report information to the SNCC system, which is part of the National Security Ministry. And what the ministry does with that information is to gather this information, compile it, and disseminate statistics in the country. This statistical system, SNCC, underwent a quality inspection because Argentina assumed the work of issuing these statistics, and so we assessed the SNCC system, and the grade was C in that first evaluation in 2017. The Excellence Center submitted an improvement plan and provided technical assistance to implement this. That is, an implement program in the short term in order to increase the quality of the system. Argentina implemented those improvements together with the Excellence Center, and in the next evaluation in 2018, the SNCC system obtained an A grade. In this evaluation of the statistical quality of the system, among the recommendations that the Excellence Center submitted, we have to stress too the adoption by Argentina of the ICCS in order to guarantee that the data published in the SNCC are comparable, and to standardize the classification of crimes in the country and in Mercosur, that is, seeking regional standardization. About the first recommendation, the adoption of ICCS in the Argentinian criminal system, this was the process that took place. First of all, this recommendation from the Excellence Center was worked together with the reporting stakeholders so we could discuss it. And of that work, we had a corresponding chart between the SNCC and the ICCS matches to see the possible matches. And that first correspondence chart that was obtained, that was then reviewed by UNODC experts in Vienna, and the official approval by the resolution of the Justice Ministry was done, where we published this chart and we approved a gradual convergence to move from the SNCC to the ICCS. We reviewed sections 1, 2, 3, and 6 of this work. Let me tell you a bit about the obstacles that we saw during this process. First of all, one of the challenges was that having so many reporting stakeholders, we found that there was certain differences in the reporting, which made it difficult to report everything with the ICCS standards. There was also resistance due to the change of routine because some stakeholders saw the adoption as an extra workload. And third, the existence of different criteria in the recording of this data by the stakeholders, because there is no one model of intervention documents. So what we did is to incorporate all stakeholders that were all part of this process through work meetings with the presence of all of them. We had the technical assistance of the Excellence Center and INEGI from Mexico, where we looked for ways to have technological improvements that made it all easier. And finally, we designed a recommendation manual to homogenize the workload, although this is not a binding, these are not binding instructions for stakeholders. Now, talking about the second recommendation by SNCC, which is the standardization at the regional level, what Argentina did was to present a proposal to adopt these classification in 2018 and to present it to the other member countries of the Mercosur region. And we use the Buenos Aires Declaration, which took place a few years before, in which member countries had committed themselves to adopt such a system, and this process had not started. That is why all this process that involved the Excellence Center had Argentina boosting this first in the domestic implementation and then at the regional level. And we stress the importance of having precise information in order to take decisions regarding criminal justice and public policies, the importance of standardizing this information in order to boost comparability so we can all see everything in the same way. And the tools to do this must be ICCS. We stress the importance of this tool and collaboration work and not competitive work to prevent crime in all countries and achieve these goals. What we were looking for was to resolve methodological problems, to standardize statistics, and to improve best practices among countries. This Argentinian proposal was accepted in Mercosur. With all member countries, we established a series of crimes to stress their standardization. But this work also faced important obstacles that we grouped on the one hand as continuity problems and on the other hand, cohesive problems. Continuity problems because every country in their statistical systems, they change laws that refer to the gathering of this information year after year and the prevalence of crimes. The reporting of these crimes changes. So we have continuity problems because of this. I'm talking about cohesion. Cohesion problems take place when we compare these statistics among countries because each country has their own laws and legal systems. They collect information and process these statistical data differently. And so we also see that there are differences in the probability of detecting crimes, reporting crime among different member states. So in order to continue with this work and resolve these challenges, we coined a plan to identify the modalities, the practices of the data gathering systems, the way we present this information, so we can modify the data systems of each country and to modify the reporting of these crimes in each country. We identified similarities and differences in the reporting in each country, always following the ICCS as a guide, because as we mentioned, we had determined to use this tool to standardize everything. The advantage that Argentina had was that they had already done their correspondence chart between their national system, SNCC, and ICCS. And so what we determined was that Argentina was going to be the country who was going to use this experience to integrate the data provided by different countries. The relay structure is this chart implemented by Argentina, in which one file, what we did was for each one of these crimes to standardize, we saw their classification according to ICCS, and each country had to do a description of these sort of crimes, including or determining what was included, what was left out, their statistics, and their legal norms and standards related to those crimes. This was a very extended work that took a lot of time. This was done in 2018. In March 2021, we were able to finish this general correspondence chart with all the information of all the countries. And in this standardization process, we were able to identify the data sources used in each country. You see the countries here: Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, Bolivia, and Chile, where they get that information and how they measure crime. We proved that all countries were measuring things the same way, upholding international standards, which was a very good starting point because they were calculating the amount and the rate the same way. Having done this correspondence chart for the region, and after doing all this work, the steps to be taken in the future, in the short term, it would be for each country in their official websites to publish this synthesis that was accomplished, and to do this in the similarly in the Mercosur website, so we could disseminate this correspondence chart with the idea of systematizing this and serving as a beacon for crime statistics in Mercosur. We go back to the Argentinian case for in the last part of the presentation. We told you that we were going to share the progress that was done in the standardization and adoption of the ICCS in a more disaggregated way. Let's remember what we saw before. The correspondence chart that was approved was based on ICCS classifications, but the convergence of SNCC to ICCS was going to be gradual, focusing on section 1, 2, 3, and 6. These sections of the ICCS refer to acts that cause the death, acts that damage people with the intention of doing so, 3 sexual crimes, and other crimes related to drugs. Here we see more information about these sections, and this is a snapshot of the current situation in the conversion process of SNCC and ICCS. The classification is quite similar now, especially in relation to homicide. There is a very high match, but there's still some gaps referring to euthanasia, femicide, suicide. In the rest of the sections, there are still big differences in our classification systems. In section 3, recent work by the criminal statistics section was able to adapt crime 11 of the SNCC to match ICCS classification. And in section 6, we see that there's a high level of compatibility related to drug crimes, but not with other substances. This standardization process in the classification sub-levels also face different obstacles, and we wanted to share these with you. First of all, the obstacles that we classified as operational obstacles, because provinces do a great effort to standardize their records with the national classifications. All modification that we propose to them is non-binding, as we mentioned. It has to be, we have to reach a consensus, and sometimes we don't reach agreements. And in some cases, changes are difficult to implement because they imply differences in data taking processes. There are also obstacles that are legal in nature because jurisdictions classify crimes according to their own classifications of 24 provinces and regions. And we've also been forced to use the penal code and special laws, for example, for human smuggling. However, we wanted to share the efforts that are being done to overcome these obstacles. On the one hand, as you know, we report every year all the available information that we can in the CTS. Recently, we started having subclassifications by sex and gender, which we didn't have in SNCC. We reconstructed a series of history and training for to improve statistical quality. And we're also changing the standards of SNCC. And as we mentioned before, we agreed on the classification of crime 11 of the SNCC system. This opening of crime 11 consisted in, well, SNCC nowadays differentiates two crimes related to sex: sexual abuse with carnal access, rape. These are crimes classified with code 10, and all of the other ones, a great amount of crimes, are labeled code 11. So what the teams of the ministry and criminal statistic team did was to propose the opening of crime 11 to have more details, a more detailed disaggregation. And this proposal that was submitted has more convergence with ICCS section 6. This was agreed by the stakeholders and it's about to be implemented. Just so you have an idea, the proposal that we agreed on, you see now that we're going to have 5 openings, higher level of disaggregation. which is going to be more compatible with ICCS. So this is our presentation. Thank you very much for your time. I'm available for any question that you might have.
Thank you very much, Guido. That was a very interesting presentation. It would be great to have your actual presentation so we can review it carefully. And of course, I think we have many questions. I just would say that we are very excited about this work that you are promoting within the framework for Mercosur. I think the scope of applying the ICCS, leading by Argentina, but within other countries through Mercosur is going to produce very interesting results. And we're very much looking forward to continue engaging with you in this process. So maybe we will go back to you after the other presentations, because I think we're running out of time and we still have 3 presentations to go. So I think I will move to Colombia. And thanks again, Guido, for this great presentation. So now we're gonna ask Magda Buitrabo from the National Statistical Office of Colombia, DANE. She's a specialized professional of the regulatory group of the Statistics Regulatory Group. Yeah, I think that's the translation. So I don't think we can see you, Magda. We can see you now. Okay. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. And over to you, Magda.
Cordial saludo. Pues para nosotros es un gusto poder.
Well, it's a pleasure for us to participate. Thank you very much for this participation. And we're here to learn from your experience rather than to teach. So if I could share my screen, and while I do this, I'm going to give the floor to our coordination of statistical regulation, Martin. Thank you very much, Magda. Thank you very much, everyone, to the organizers. Thank you so much for letting us show our experience in the classification. I think I have some issues with my camera. It's not showing my face, but anyway, thank you very much. The idea is to show you our experience throughout the adaptation process in the adoption of the international classification of crimes. Within DANE, we, depending on certain...
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask you if you can use your presentation mode, because we don't see like the full screen of your presentation.
Ok, perfecto. Magda, si puedes poner en la pantalla.
Okay,
completa.
Magda, could you please go to full screen? Great.
Thank you.
As I was saying, we within DANE do updates and maintenance to the classifications according to the needs of the country, and this is done periodically. In the case of ICCS, we do this every 2 years. We launched the adapted classification in 2020. During 2021, we carried out all the implementation processes. And in 2022, according to our maintenance program, we are starting the process with different entities involved in the country in order to review the current standards in the country and see the needs to maintain these classifications in the country. Magda, I think we lost the presentation. Yes, I'm having some issues with the presentation. Maybe if you share it with me, I can show it in my screen. Okay, so we can now see your screen. You can just show it in full screen. Great. So let's start with the presentation. We have in Colombia have the same acronym ICCS to represent the implementation of the adapted international classification for Colombia. And while we see the presentation, let me tell you that in Colombia, there is not a centralized statistics in an entity. DANE is the one in charge of gathering statistical information, but we have different entities that are producing statistics. In terms of crime, I will show you which entity, which agency shares what. The challenge in Colombia is to integrate all these reports that we have in Colombia. All census are integrated, but statistics from law enforcement and police departments and prosecutors' offices, they all have their own information systems, and they have different ways of keeping these data reports. The prosecutor's office, for example, focuses on investigated reports, and so that has made everything complicated a little bit. However, we have other information systems for different kinds of crimes. In broad strokes, for gender-based violence, we have an integrated data system. For homicides, we have the system of the police department and the prosecutor's office mainly. And because of the past armed conflicts in Colombia, the difficulty has been to integrate all the numbers, all the data, all the ways we count, and the fact that each entity has, well, one of the questions that we always try to answer when we gather all stakeholders is who reports what? And that's what we're trying to work on at the moment. So let me tell you how the process has been to adopt the ICCS in Colombia. We started in 2018. As I mentioned, we are starting with the classification. We're still taking our few first steps. Between 2018 and 2019, we carry out a process with the accompaniment of INEGI and the Excellence Center, and the help that we have had has been amazing. They helped us with the first awareness workshop for ICCS. Many stakeholders participated, and based on that, we started working in different institutions between 2019 to 2020. In July 2020, we finished having these roundtables to start the implementation. Here in Colombia, institutions work very close to the penal code, and this is sometimes difficult because concepts tend to be too square at times based on the Colombian code. So on top of doing these raising of awareness about the concepts and definitions, we also had to, in a way, raise awareness about the fact that crimes and classifications need to be standardized and answer to statistical needs. If we stick to the penal code, it'll be more difficult one of the main difficulties actually in our correlation charts is that one ICCS classification or several ICCS categories can be included in just one article of the Colombian Penal Code. So processes can get complicated because of that. So let's continue. In August 2020, we finished the final version. We reviewed it between all the entities and all the agencies participating in the standardization. We issued the final proposal in August 2020. We always do a public consultation so citizens can review this and share their concerns and questions. And this was done between October 7th and November 8th, 2020. And this was made official and published in December 2020. As I was saying, for the adaptation, the support received by the Excellence Center was incredible. Because of these awareness workshop for different agencies, we prepared different work tools for these roundtables. And I have to thank all the entities and agencies that were very welcoming of these tools. There was restlessness, and some agencies are aware of the importance of standardizing these statistics and the advantages that come from this. In Colombia, we had two big changes, so to speak, in relation to the international classification, section 4, which is actions against property. Section 4 in Colombia is not applicable because of our norms and standards. The international classifications have adjectives or qualifications for the crime. I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm not sure if I'm on the correct slide. Can you let me know? Yes, please go back one. This one, number 8. Let me see, slide number 8, great. I'm sorry, I might be speaking too quickly, so please interrupt me. Just let me know when we have to change the slide. Great. As I was saying, section 4, which are crimes against property and violent acts against people, Colombia didn't have this direct application of this because theft in Colombia, as stated in section 4, do not have these adjectives or classifications. So we had to take these classifications and adapt them to the national context. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the difficulties because, again, each entity, each agency accounts for these crimes differently. So it makes it a bit difficult. And section 11, which are other crimes that are not classified in ICCS, and other provisions on minors. As I was saying a few moments ago, section 11 is very important because of the armed conflicts, In Colombia, we have a law for victims that regulate all crimes in armed conflicts contexts, and we need to clarify Section 11. Because of that, this slide is how we can see all 35 agencies or entities that participated in this adapting process. All these entities participated in each one of these sections. And in this chart, you can see that in section 1, certain agencies participated, and similarly in section 2, etc. We must clarify that in all sections, the participation of the Colombian National Police delegates and the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Justice, the National Prosecutor's Office, they accompanied us throughout the whole process, even answering questions on the national consultation. As I was saying, one of the main challenges in the adaptation process has been the adapting of statistical processes. Provinces are very close at times to the definitions that are outside of the penal code, and some other definitions are not clear enough. So that has been a challenge that we have seen and we have worked on, and entities have been very grateful because the Ministry of Defense is updating the white book, and they were telling us that these classifications have helped them a lot in defining and classifying the concepts that are the more complex ones. And so reaching these concept standardization and having these presence in the wide statistical book, we will be able to have more impact. The adapting of information systems for the registration of crime statistics has also been challenging. When we were working in the implementation process in 2021, we tried to do these correspondence tables, and we found that, for example, the prosecutor's office assigned an ID based on the penal code, and that makes every crime to become a record. And when we try to do the concept standardization and correspondence table, we had to review more than 15,000 records. With the police department, the system is similar. They are guided by the penal code. They try to define crimes a bit more, but with the police department, we had to review around 2,000 records in order to have these correspondence tables of adapted definitions. That was one of the main challenges, to determine how we're going to change our point of view and how we're going to change this in these agencies. Training and preparation of personnel with the prosecutor's office. While it is true that all data are well centralized and is well available, we still work with paper forms. They are systematized, but the questions are not mandatory. So government workers in the prosecutor's office told us that it was very difficult to have quality-based documentation because not all fields were answered. So that was another challenge. Next slide, please. Okay, quickly, I'll tell you the agencies that were part of the classifications that have different systems. And as I was saying, in Colombia, it's a bit difficult to gather information and data and centralize data in just one agency because, for example, the National General Prosecutor's Office does investigation and prosecution. The Prison National Institute also has statistics according to prisons. The Legal Defense National Agency has nationwide statistics. The Judiciary Council also has statistics, and the Ministry of Justice gathers all statistics in terms of law. They carry out statistics on people who have been displaced because of the peace agreements, and based on law 418 and 975, which are complementary laws. The General Prosecutor's Office also does extrajudicial conciliation statistics, which are different from the police departments and the other agencies. For example, in 2020, you know that there was an increase in social protests. Colombia was no exception, and we try to gather the data of people impacted because of gender in the framework of these protests. And so all these entities, police, the prosecutor's office, etc., the Ministry for Women, and when we're trying to conciliate these data, we're analyzing these 2 months of protest, and the police reported 2 things. The prosecutor's office reported 4 cases, and we saw the importance of standardizing these concepts so we could harmonize these concepts and crimes and the way we report crimes. Next slide. And these are all the agencies and entities that report statistics and the statistical operations that they have. I was telling you about the implementation that we have been doing in 2021. In order to do this implementation and taking into account what we have, before we start the process as such, we did a work plan. We analyzed each one of the sectors and the relevance and of the data that they work. And out of those 35, we processed 10 at the start, and because of logistics, we then prioritized 3 sources: the Ministry of Defense, the National Police, and the General Prosecutor's Office. And based on this, we are gathering all the experiences that we had in the implementation in order to issue a manual in order to implement this in other agencies. As I was saying, we had different complexities because of the way we report crimes. When we did the adaptation initially, we had to first raise awareness and comply with the schedules and raise awareness about the need of having the same classifications. We did this, but the disaggregation of valuables were left on the back burner. These is key, of course, in order to classify crimes in a better way, in a more consistent way in our statistics. With the Ministry of Defense, we focus more on concepts because they are the ones that generate the white book of the sector, and they receive information from the National Police. With the General Prosecutor's Office, we check the records that they have. I was saying that we reviewed around 14,000 records, but information.
Magda, sorry, I'm gonna ask
Magda,
if you can wrap up, perhaps, because we still have more two presentations to go.
Ok, listo. Siguiente, por favor.
next slide. Talking about the implementation, these are the main actions. We made the internal process more social within agencies to identify crimes. We standardized the crimes based on Law 599 of the year 2000, the Penal Code. The final product of 2021 of the Prosecutor's Office was a roadmap, a guide that allows the Prosecutor's Office in their internal processes to standardize the crimes that they assign to each one of these acts and crimes with that classification. So they have adapted the classification more. And we're also seeing the possibility of adapting their information system in the National Police, and the National History Center also intended to standardize their classifications. With them, we are starting to standardize concepts. It's a bit difficult because the way we see crimes in the Historic Memory National Center is difficult because this is only focused on armed conflicts and the victims that they have had. So the work is more complex and more focused on human rights in this regard. Additionally, we have been doing training to promote the use of the classification. Last year, we had four big training courses open to the general public, not just agencies, but other entities and private institutions, so they could get to know the classification with entities that we've been working closely. We've had other training courses, and for this year, we're going to launch the design of an online course for the classification. And this is going to be done in November. We're going to have this additional course. Next slide. Next slide. As I was saying, one of the unexpected results was finding with so many difficulties to gather all these crimes. And then with the Historic Memory National Center, we found the difficulty in terms of the concepts. So this is something that we intend to resolve in 2022 with the maintenance activities. Additionally, in the Colombian legislation, we had strong changes this year, not just with articles that have been modified, but there are two big changes. The law 2111 that modified all of Title 11 of the Penal Code, referring to environmental crimes, and Sentence 55 of 2022, which decriminalizes abortion up to 24 weeks. So we have to see the categories that are going to be impacted by these two big changes. We also have changes in cattle theft. This is something that we have to review, and we will see these changes in the classifications. And according to their mission, the mission of these agencies, each agency accounts for different kinds of crimes, different crimes in a different way. And so that is one of the main obstacles that we're working on, basically. Next slide. And with the intention of facing these difficulties for 2022, we're organizing the maintenance of the classification, the ICCS. The idea is to make this a more robust tool that allows agencies to capture crime data better. And to raise awareness about the importance of centralizing, or to harmonize, rather, to have more harmony and standardization in these statistics. As I was saying, we have difficulty in one of the crimes that are more prevalent in Colombia, the theft of bicycles. And according to the way it happened, if it was the bicycle was taken from a home, it has a different name than if it was taken in a commercial area, then it has another name. So the main difficulty is that other agencies gather bicycle theft information together with grand theft auto and the theft of vehicles. And some others consider this theft from a person, from the property of a person. So we're in the process of maintaining all these statistics. The idea is also to continue working with the Historic Memory National Center so we can better use their data and take advantage of this effort to update any information and inclusions and exclusions. Next slide. As I was mentioning at the beginning, something that we need to do are the disaggregation variables. The exercise that we did with the prosecutor's office and the police department basically included the disaggregation variables. And basically, this is the experience that Colombia has had, as I was saying. We're starting and we're still taking our first steps with this. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you what we're doing, and we thank the experience that you've had from which we will be able to learn a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Magda. That was a very thorough explanation of the great progress that you have made in Colombia. I think you were just following what Enrico mentioned at the beginning, having the leading or a leading organization, trying to convince the other ones and to work with other institutions. I mean, you work with pretty much all of the data producers on crime and justice. It's very impressive to have all these activities with these 35 institutions. I think your experience shows that implementing a classification like the ICCS, it's really a gradual process. And I think you have made important progress so far. I know that you still have a long way to go, but it's very exciting to see that you are engaged and that they are engaged with DANE. So congratulations for that. Thank you for sharing this experience. And now we'll move to another continent. We move to the Korean experience. And before sharing the screen, I just want to thank as well to our participants from Mongolia. They are observing this session. Also to colleagues from the United Arab Emirates and also colleagues from Bahrain. Thank you very much for joining this session. We hope you can get a lot from it. So now I give the floor to Dr. Kwak. He's gonna share with us the Korean experience in implementing the ICCS. Over to you, Dr. Kwak.
Thanks, Solomon. Okay, this is Sang-Hoon Kwak from Chungnam National University in South Korea. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to extend my appreciation for everyone who has organized this workshop today. Personally, it's such an honor for me to make this presentation, and then sharing our Korean experience for implementing ICCS in South Korea. Today, my topic is implementation of ICCS in South Korea. So next slide. The presentation will follow this particular order. So since we went out of time, so probably the first part, actually, I was going to introduce about the ICCS, but I will skip that part, and I will more focus on the Korean experience. Especially, I will explain Korean crime classification system, and then implementation of ICCS in Korea will be discussed, followed by some policy implications. Next. Thank you. Before I move, sometimes we focus on so much specific challenge and specific things, so that we forgot to like a big picture of the process. So that here is our definition of our ICCS, and then as you guys know, in 2015, 46 UN Statistical Commission endorsed the ICCS as an international standard. Can you skip to next? Skip. So yeah, I will skip this part, and then I focus on the Korean experience. Going to page 8, please. Yeah. Now let's move to Korean crime classification system. First of all, Korean Criminal Act was enacted in 1953, right after Korean War, which is based on a continental legal tradition rather than a common legal tradition like the UK.
Oh my God.
Hold on a second. Yeah, we have technical issues in here. Sure. Okay. Am I okay? Sure. Okay. Is it okay to go? Or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry about that. The Act consists of 372 articles, including 4 chapters of general provisions and then 42 chapters of specific provisions. In addition to Korean Criminal Act, there are more than 180 specific criminal acts in South Korea. So usually specific criminal acts are political tools for the government to fight a certain type of crime. So for example, we have the huge increased number of sexual violence in South Korea. So the government create a Sexual Violence Prevention and Victim Protection Act, and so on and so forth. So among those 180 specific criminal acts, 114 specific criminal acts were included in official crime statistics especially by Supreme Prosecutor's Office. Next, please. So regarding crime statistical code, which is also known as CSC or CS code, is the primary key to corresponding ICCS code with the CS code in South Korea. As I mentioned earlier, unlike ICCS, the unit of classification for Korean system is a violation of law. So CS code usually assigned to each article of criminal law. So as of May 2022, there are more than 20,000 CS code available right now. So CS code consists of 10-digit numbers. So unlike ICCS, there is no hierarchical structure in this particular code. But instead, each digit represents the special aspect of the violation of the law. Next page. Here, so 10-digit numbers. So first number represents whether the law is revised or not, and then second digit indicates type of law, and third through fourth digit represent the article number, fifth through eighth digit is represent the unique ID number, and ninth indicate attempt, 1, preparation, 2, conspiracy, and 3, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the 10th digit indicate instigation or aiding. So for example, we have murder, which is a violation of Criminal Act Article 250, Section 1, so which has own CS code like 1240101000. Next, please. In case of specific criminal act, CS code was assigned irregularly, which means that for some cases like Narcotic Control Act, a single code is assigned for all violation of this particular criminal act, which means that simple consumption, transportation, or selling illegal drug has same CS code, so we cannot distinguish those type of illegal behavior under this particular law. So on the other hand, not many cases, some specific criminal act has few CS codes. For example, although there are 10 different illegal behavior under particular law or act, the CS code is only available for 1 or 2 illegal behaviors. Next, please. So here are some progression of implementation, ICCS implementation in South Korea. In 2015, the Korean Institute of Criminology, which is known as KIC, introduced ICCS in South Korea. In this particular study, the researcher raised some critical problems for ICCS implementation in South Korea, such as the different classification unit problem and then lack of interagency cooperation. In 2016, the KOSTAT collaborated with the KIC and Police Science Institute to conduct a preliminary study where they translate ICCS manual into Korean. No. So from 2017 through 2020, KOSTAT funded a 4-year research project with academic scholars, including myself. And after first phase of the KOSTAT studies, the KOSTAT begin to conduct the second phase of study from the last year. Next. Here are some important accomplishments for first phase of the KOSTAT funded research. The first, CS code and ICCS code matching principle was suggested. More specifically, ICCS code corresponding with the CS code. When we matching these two codes, we have to do one-on-one matching. And the second, the matching with the higher level code, if the higher level code were available to corresponding with the CS code. And finally, for multiple offenses, apply the hierarchy rules based on the severity of the punishment. Next, please. So after multiple years of matching process, the matching rate for first phase is about 53%. But after excluding 4,214 CS code for violation of military criminal act, the matching rate went up to 67.7%. So also, we developed corresponding tables and the Korean crime classification manual, which explain how and what CS code corresponding with ICC code, so including exclusion and or inclusion. Next. Here is the example for the corresponding table for murder. So as you can see, oh, you cannot read it, I guess it is written in Korean. So anyhow, the left side is ICCS code for the murder, which is 010100. So the right side, we have CS code from the South Korea. So we have the multiple CS code 2 corresponding with a particular one ICCS code, as you can see. Next. So since last year, we begin to start the second phase of KOSTAT funded research. Especially last year, we modified the matching principle in order to improve the matching rate. So the researchers from that particular study decided to add a new matching principle, which is conspiracy, preparation, attention, instigation of each crime offenses, respectively matched with the principal offenses. And after apply this modified version of the principle, the matching rate increased from 67.7% to 80.2%. And then we also developed the policy and practical implication to apply this particular corresponding table to our current Korean information system of criminal justice service, which is known as KIC. Next, please. Finally, here are some political implications. So by implementing ICCS in South Korea, we believe that official crime statistic and classification system can be improved. So in order to accomplish these particular purposes, and first, cooperation among the related agencies are the key to success, which include in South Korea is the KOSTAT, Ministry of Justice and Police, Supreme Prosecutor's Office. And then second, educating the practitioner who in charge of crime statistics about the benefits of the implementation of ICCS. So finally, the KIC system, which I mentioned earlier, has to be updated for incorporating ICC as a system into our current system. Next, please. Thank you for listening. That was a really short presentation, but if you have any question or technical assistance or other concern, anything, so please contact me via my email there or call me with that number. Thank you so much, and then muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cuadra. It was a very quick but very thorough presentation. We appreciate your use of time. We will move on to the final presentation by Mexico. I'm sorry because we ran out of time, but I think we still can use about 15 minutes to see Mexico's presentation. finish right on time before our next meeting. And I apologize for those that are online. Bear with us, but I think it's very interesting to have this session, and we definitely can talk about this a lot more. So Guillermo, over to you.
Gracias. ¿Me escuchan bien?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay. Buen día. Voy a tratar de ser lo más ejecutivo. En realidad es muy interesante identificar.
Good morning. I'm going to try to be economical. While we're talking about different countries, we share many similarities in terms of the challenges and the process that we followed to implement ICCS. In the case of Mexico, I would like to tell you a little bit of the context. Dr. Oscar Jaimes mentioned this a little bit. Mexico is a federal country divided into 3 levels of government. That is, we have a federal government, 32 states, and 2,471 municipalities, which means that we have 1 federal criminal code, 32 local or state criminal codes, and specific laws or general laws that classify specific crimes. For example, human trafficking, torture, kidnappings, etc. Something particular in the Mexican case, unlike Anglo-Saxon systems, is that the criminal prosecution is not carried out by police departments, but rather independent institutions in the majority of cases. The most important components, these are not all of the criminal justice system in Mexico, are public security, depending on secretariats in charge of this. And we see this in the federation, the states, and in the municipalities. We have alternative mechanisms to resolve controversies, which again is to try to depressurize the criminal justice system. And we find these in the federation, in the states, and in the municipalities. We have a very particular regimen. We have the part of criminal prosecution, which can be found in the federal and the state levels, justice administration in the federal and state levels, and the correctional system or prison system can be found in the federal and state levels. Again, all this makes this complex. We have more or less 55 special laws or acts for specific crimes and 33 different penal codes. Talking about federal crimes, which are the ones that are managed and administered by the Federation, at 2020, we have records amounting to 78,482, and common crimes, as they're called, we have almost 2 million. And so in terms of weight, basically 96% corresponds to the local scope, and 4% to the federal scope. As I was saying, this makes things difficult because similar to what we heard in Colombia and Argentina, each institution, each state has its own penal code and makes their records based on what is established in these states. And if we review each one of these state penal codes, in the state realm, we have more or less 15,000 classified crimes. And federal crimes, we have around 1,700, which gives us a total of a maximum of 16,700 crimes and a minimum of 16,400 crimes. So this is very complex, and this has obviously had impacts in the way crimes have been reported historically in the country. As a bit of background in the National Crime Classification Framework in the country, this was the result of collaborative work among the different agencies involved in crime data production and their analysis. We're talking mainly about the National Council on Public Security, which is made up of public security secretariats, federal and state, the Governor National Conference, the National Center for Planning, Analysis, and Information to Fight Against Crime, SENAPI, and the National Information Center. And from the first meetings with these agencies, we proposed to have a list of the most basic crimes. This took place in 2011. And so the first version of the framework in Mexico reviewed the more than 15,000 crimes nationwide. We standardized them or classify them in 7 categories with 41 variables. And this is the initial reflection of what we were working on towards the ICCF implementation. This is just a timeline. This work began in 2011 in Mexico with the first issuance of the technical standard, the framework. In 2015, we had the ICCS endorsement, and in 2018, we had the second publication of the technical standard or framework. In its second version, is very much compatible with ICCS, which has allowed us to report to the CTS and different reports. Now, the 2018 update consisted on the challenges, of course, acknowledging that in Mexico, there is a criminal reality that is ever changing, and in legal terms, we need to update penal codes, both the federal one and the state ones. And this has repercussions because it's not just a matter of including new crimes, but also excluding the ones that are no longer current. Also, the update consisted in developing tools to assist institutions in their implementation. A third thing consisted in including new information needs with disaggregation of these crimes. And lastly, and most importantly, to align the technical framework for crime classification in Mexico to the ICCF, which included many consultations, a public consultation, a legal review and structural review of the classification, and the INEGI government board, which is the maximum deciding body in the institute, to issue this framework. Which are some of the innovations? We included new crimes adjusted to judicial reforms that I mentioned, ICCS compatibility, just as we have the equivalence tables comparing the state and federal penal codes with the framework. We have a table comparing the framework with ICCS. And unlike the first version, in the second version, we include federal crimes. This work, these innovations make made it possible to go from 7 categories to 9 categories. And we included crime characteristics or additional desegregations for events, victims, and possible offenders. In total, the 2018 version of this framework, this technical framework, included 68 variables that are very much compatible with the current version of ICCS. Just to give you an example, we have the case of theft. In the Mexican context, this word does not exist. We have a different word for theft, for taking someone else's possession, very simply. The characteristics for these crimes are that it can be intentional or unintentional, violent or non-violent, simple, minor, aggravated, or qualified, and with different characteristics, with a firearm, with a knife or a sharp object, with a body part, etc. Thanks to the adoption of ICCS and their reflection in the framework, we were able to distinguish and compare it with Latin American countries, because when we reviewed things before, there was a lot of differences between what was a theft and what was stealing. Robbery is, of course, involves the use of violence, while theft implies taking someone else's property without violence or threats or coercion. And this gives much more clarity and also cohesion with the numbers that are being published domestically and internationally. And the result of this distinction can be seen in this slide. If it's a robbery, which is with violence, and without violence, which is then classified as theft, and this can be distinguished in the Mexican framework and ICCS. Which are some of the differences that we have with ICCS? First of all, there are some state crimes that, because of the Mexican context, they are not in ICCS. For example, the illegal subtraction of hydrocarbons or oil. And in the Mexican case, we also have these distinction between federal and common crimes, which is not the standard in most countries. And the impact of this is crimes included in ICCS that are not crimes in Mexico, but rather administrative faults. Something additional to this is the record systems of different entities depending on the events. The Mexican standards don't consider labels related to the motivation or the situational context in which the crime took place. That is, we at present are not including whether the crime was related to organized crime. And lastly, something really important is that we have realized since the implementation, since 2011, is that the crime classification in Mexico requires a faster and constant revision process, not really in periods, because crime dynamics are very hasty, and that has an impact in the classification and the inclusion of crimes in penal codes. These crimes might not be reflected in reports at times, so that is why it is important to do this faster and constant. Talking about the implementation and next steps, the technical framework in the second version for 2018 includes 3 elements that have included the implementation manual. And what this entails is for everyone to understand the implementation process, the precautions that we need to take when we adapt tools for the INEGI system. For example, we also have an online crime classification tool, which makes it possible to accelerate the translation processes of these classifications. And we also provide different training workshops related to concepts and techniques. And these training workshops are very much related to what we have been discussing, the importance of having a national classification of crimes aligned with the international context and working on having more precise records. And this has been done both in public security secretariats, prosecutors' offices, penitentiary systems, and other institutions of the criminal justice systems. Some of the next steps are, well, despite the great improvement that we've had in the past years, we need to strengthen the statistical capabilities of criminal justice institutions, and especially in having a more automated classification process. We will go more in depth about this on Thursday. And also we have to think ahead of the changes of administrations and the complications related to that, because when there is a change of classification, there can be variabilities, and this, of course, changes the trends of the statistics for different crimes. Something very important is that we need to do is the update of the technical framework for emerging and relevant crime types. For example, gender-based violence, violence against children, political violence, cyber crimes, among others. And lastly, and this is also important, is to align the classification, the Mexican framework, with additional components that are being generated. The framework to measure femicide and crimes against girls, and we will have to adapt and align the proposal with all the institutions and agencies in order to make it operational and aligned with international instruments. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Guillermo. That was very interesting and brief presentation, even though we know the process of implementing a classification on crime in Mexico started even before the ICCS was approved in 2015. So very interesting presentation indeed. And unfortunately, we ran out of time. I don't think we have enough time now for questions and answers, but I think we need to close the meeting now. But I really want to thank all the participants. I think it has been a very interesting exchange of knowledge and experiences. And I'm sure that, especially for UNODC, this is going to be very interesting because, as you know, and I think Enrico mentioned it, we're in the process of drafting the manual on the implementation on the ICCS, and actually we're trying to find experiences and best practices about how countries are rolling out this implementation. So we're going to use some of the experiences that were shared this afternoon with us. And with this, thank you very much to all. Thank you to the interpreters as well. I know that it's challenging to provide interpretations for this sort of a technical work. We really appreciated the work that you do for us. Thank you very much, and have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And looking forward to our next meeting. Thank you.